You know that specific moment in every werewolf romance where the guy rejects the girl, and she instantly falls to her knees, sobbing until she hyperventilates? Yeah, I don't do that. I was wearing $4,000 worth of Italian lace and heels that cost more than my groom's entire car. I wasn't about to ruin my mascara for a man who still thought Axe body spray counted as a shower. When Alpha Liam looked me in the eye at the altar and told me he was dumping me for my twin sister, I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't feel my heart shatter. I felt relief. Sweet, intoxicating relief. But before I could turn around and sprint toward the exit and a life of blissful singleness, the church doors blew open. And he walked in. The kind of man who makes the devil check his locks at night. Welcome back to Eliana's Romance Library, your home for the fiercest mates and the most dominant alphas. Before we dive into today's story, I want to know where my wolf pack is tuning in from. Head down to the comments and let me know which city or country you're listening from right now. I love seeing how global this family is becoming. Now get comfortable, it's time to begin. Chapter 1. The Audacity. I, Alpha Liam of the Silver Creek Pack, reject you, Callie. The words hung in the stagnant air of the chapel like a bad fart. Beside me, my twin sister Clara let out a perfectly rehearsed gasp, covering her mouth with hands that were trembling just a little too much to be convincing. She looked at Liam with wide, doe-like eyes, the picture of innocent surprise, even though I'd found her lip gloss in his glove box 3 weeks ago. I choose Clara, Liam continued, his voice booming with a self-importance that was frankly embarrassing, given that he was wearing a rental tuxedo. She is my true mate. She is the Luna this pack deserves. The congregation went deathly silent. This was the part where I was supposed to scream. This was the part where I was supposed to drop to the floor and beg the fates to change my destiny. Everyone leaned forward in the pews, hungry for my humiliation. They wanted the broken girl. They wanted the tragedy. I looked at Liam. Really looked at him. I saw the sweat beading on his upper lip. I saw the way he puffed out his chest, trying to look dominant while dumping a woman at the altar in front of 200 people. And then, I felt it. A bubble rising in my chest. It wasn't a sob. It wasn't a scream. I snorted. The sound echoed off the high vaulted ceiling. Liam blinked, his alpha mask slipping. Callie? I tried to hold it in, I really did. But the sheer absurdity of it all, the freedom suddenly crashing over me, was too much. The snort turned into a chuckle, and the chuckle turned into a full-blown, head-thrown-back laugh. I laughed until my stomach muscles ached. I laughed until I had to grab the edge of the altar just to stay upright. You, I gasped, wiping a tear of pure joy from my eye. You're rejecting me? Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. You're laughing? Clara whispered, her performance faltering. Callie, you're supposed to be devastated. Devastated? I reached up and ripped the veil off my head, tossing it casually onto Liam's shoulder. Clara, honey, you just saved me from a lifetime of mediocrity. He's all yours. I hope you like hearing about his high school football glory days, because that's the only story he knows. I kicked off my heels, grabbing them by the straps. Well, this has been fun. I'm going to go turn this reception into a celebration of my dodging a bullet. Peace out. I turned on my bare heel, ready to march down the aisle and into the sunset. The guests were staring at me with their mouths hanging open, horrified that I wasn't broken. I felt light. I felt invincible. I took 3 steps toward the double doors at the back of the room. Boom. The heavy oak doors didn't just open. They were blasted inward by a force of nature. A gust of wind swept through the chapel, extinguishing every candle in the room instantly. The temperature plummeted 20 degrees in a heartbeat. And then, the scent hit me. It wasn't the damp, earthy smell of the pack wolves I grew up with. It was dark, expensive. It smelled like storm clouds, crushed pine needles, and a power so ancient it made the hair on my arms stand up. It rolled over me in a suffocating wave, freezing me in place. A man stepped out of the shadows of the vestibule. He was massive, broad-shouldered and towering, dressed in a black suit that cost more than this entire building. He didn't look at the crowd. He didn't look at Liam, who was currently trembling behind me. His eyes, burning with a predatory molten gold light, locked onto mine. The air left my lungs. My inner wolf, who had been laughing with me seconds ago, suddenly dropped into a deep, submissive bow inside my head. The stranger walked down the aisle. He didn't rush. He moved with the terrifying grace of a predator who knows he has already caught his prey. The silence in the room was so heavy it felt like it would crush my ribs. He stopped inches from me. He was so tall I had to crane my neck to look him in the eye. The energy radiating off him was intoxicating, a magnetic pull that made my knees weak. "Who are you?" Liam squeaked from the altar, trying to sound authoritative and failing miserably. "This is a private ceremony." The stranger didn't even blink. He didn't turn his head. He kept his golden gaze fixed on me, devouring me whole. "You rejected her," the stranger said. His voice was a low rumble, like thunder vibrating through the floorboards. It wasn't a question. Yes," Liam stammered. "I chose Clara. Callie is free." The stranger smirked, a dark, dangerous curve of his lips that sent a shiver straight down my spine. He reached out, his large, warm hand cupping my jaw, his thumb brushing over my bottom lip. "You trade a diamond for a rock, little pup?" he whispered, his eyes darkening as he leaned down, his lips brushing against the shell of my ear. "Then, the diamond is mine." Chapter 2. The Departure. The diamond is mine. The words weren't shouted, but they hit the room with the force of a physical blow. A collective gasp rippled through the pews, followed by the sound of 200 people suddenly finding their shoes incredibly interesting. The alpha power rolling off this stranger was suffocating, thick, heavy, and tasting like ozone before a lightning strike. I blinked, trying to process the fact that a man who looked like he'd been carved out of marble and sin was claiming me in front of my ex-fiancé. Liam, to his credit or stupidity, tried to salvage his shred of dignity. "Now wait a minute," Liam started, taking a half step forward, though his knees were visibly knocking together. "You can't just walk in here and claim a rejected female. She's damaged goods now. She has no pack." The stranger didn't even look at him. He kept his gaze locked on me, his golden eyes scanning my face as if he were memorizing a map. "Damaged?" he murmured, the word vibrating against my skin. "Or finally unburdened by mediocrity?" He straightened up, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop another 10 degrees. He finally turned his head toward Liam. He didn't growl. He didn't bare his teeth. He just looked at him with an expression of such profound boredom that it was more insulting than a punch to the face. "Speak again," the stranger said softly, "and I will buy this land, evict your entire pack, and turn this chapel into a parking lot." Liam's mouth snapped shut with an audible click. My sister, Clara, was staring at the stranger with her mouth hanging open, clearly reconsidering her life choices. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "We are leaving," the stranger stated, turning back to me. It wasn't a question. "I have a car," I said, pointing vaguely toward the exit. "It's a beat-up Honda, but it has a full tank." "You won't need it." Before I could protest or ask for his name, or point out that I didn't actually know him, he bent down. One arm hooked behind my knees, the other swept around my back, and suddenly I was airborne. He lifted me effortlessly, holding me high against his chest like I weighed nothing more than the veil I'd just discarded. The contact was electric. Through the thin fabric of his suit, I could feel the heat of his skin, scorching and solid. My hands instinctively went to his shoulders to steady myself, and the muscle beneath my palms was hard as rock. "Put me down," I hissed, though I didn't struggle too hard. My heels were in my hand, and honestly, being carried was preferable to walking barefoot on the cold stone floor. "I can walk. I'm a fierce, independent woman, remember? I just laughed at my own rejection." "You are a queen without a crown," he replied, his voice a low rumble in his chest that I felt everywhere. "And queens do not walk through the debris of their past." He turned and strode down the aisle. The guests parted like the Red Sea, shrinking back into the pews to avoid touching him. I looked over his shoulder as we passed the altar. Liam was pale. Clara looked like she was about to cry. I offered them a little wave with my shoes. The stranger pushed through the broken double doors and carried me out into the cool night air. A sleek black limousine was waiting at the curb, engine idling, a driver already holding the back door open. "Get in," he murmured, setting me down gently on the plush leather seat but not pulling away. His body blocked the exit, boxing me in. "Your life began the moment he let you go, Callie. Don't look back." Chapter 3. The Sky Palace. The limo ride was short, silent, and incredibly tense. Not the bad kind of tense, the kind where the air feels charged, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. The stranger sat across from me, his long legs stretched out, watching me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. We pulled up not to a hotel, but to a private airstrip. Of course, because why would the mystery billionaire drive when he could fly? 10 minutes later, I was seated in a cream-colored leather chair aboard a jet that was nicer than my apartment. The interior was all mahogany and soft lighting, smelling of expensive leather and that same storm and pine scent that clung to him. As the jet taxied down the runway, the adrenaline finally started to wear off, replaced by a dull ache in my feet and a sudden realization of how insane this was. I was on a plane with a man I didn't know. I should be terrified. But I wasn't. My wolf was pacing in my mind, not in fear, but in anticipation. She kept purring, "Safe, powerful, mine." "You're thinking too loud," he said. I looked up. He was sitting in the chair opposite me, a crystal glass of amber liquid in his hand. He had shed his suit jacket, rolling up the sleeves of his white shirt to reveal forearms that were thick with muscle and dusted with dark hair. "I'm wondering who you are," I said, crossing my arms. "And why you decided to crash a wedding just to save the reject." He took a slow sip of his drink, his eyes never leaving mine. "I didn't crash it. I was coming to burn it down if the groom said I do. Him rejecting you was the most intelligent thing he has ever done." I blinked. You were going to burn it down?" "Metaphorically," he smirked, though the glint in his eye suggested otherwise. He set the glass down and leaned forward. "Give me your foot." "Excuse me?" "Your foot, Callie. Give it to me." It was a command, wrapped in velvet. Against my better judgment, I extended my leg. He took my foot in his large, warm hand. His thumb dug into the arch of my foot, rubbing away the ache from standing in 4-inch heels for an hour. A gasp escaped my lips before I could catch it. The sensation wasn't just relief, it was pleasure. Sparks shot up my calf. The bond, the mating pull, flared hot and bright. "I am Darius," he said, his voice dropping an octave as his thumb worked magic on my sore muscles. "And I didn't save you because I pity you. I saved you because I have spent 200 years looking for the only woman strong enough to laugh in the face of ruin." He looked up, his thumb pausing on my ankle bone. "I don't want a damsel, Callie. I have enough guards. I want an equal." "And you think that's me?" I breathed, my heart hammering against my ribs. "I know it is," Darius replied. "Liam saw a girl he couldn't control and got scared. I see a fire I want to burn in." The intercom chimed. "Your Majesty, we are beginning our descent." "Majesty?" I froze. Kings didn't exist anymore. Not really. Unless... I looked out the window. Below us, nestled in the peaks of a snow-capped mountain range that looked suspiciously like the Swiss Alps, was a structure of glass and steel, glowing in the moonlight. It wasn't a house. It was a fortress. Chapter 4. The Glass Fortress. The estate was ridiculous. There was no other word for it. It was a sprawling masterpiece of modern architecture clinging to the side of a jagged cliff, surrounded by miles of untouched snow and forest. It was beautiful, cold, and completely isolated. Darius led me through the massive front doors. The inside was warmer than I expected, the floors heated beneath my bare feet. It was silent. No servants, no pack members, just us. "Where is everyone?" I asked, my voice echoing slightly in the vast entryway. "I don't keep a pack here," Darius said, walking ahead of me. "The noise irritates me. This is my sanctuary." "It's a glass cage," I muttered, looking at the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over a terrifying drop. "It's a vantage point," he corrected. "Come, there is something you need to see." He led me down a long hallway lined with art that I was pretty sure belonged in the Louvre. We stopped at a set of double doors at the end of the hall. Darius hesitated for a fraction of a second, the first time I'd seen him unsure, before pushing them open. I stepped inside and stopped dead. It was a room, a massive circular room, but it wasn't a bedroom. It was a collection. On the walls hung paintings of fierce women, warriors, queens, goddesses. On shelves lined with velvet were trinkets, a dagger with a ruby hilt, a first edition of The Art of War, a diamond necklace that looked heavy enough to snap a neck. "What is this?" I asked, walking over to a mannequin displaying a gown made of midnight blue silk. "I have known for a long time that my mate would not be a soft thing," Darius said from the doorway. He was leaning against the frame, watching me. "So, for decades, whenever I saw something beautiful and dangerous, something that reminded me of the woman I was waiting for, I bought it." He walked over to me, stopping just behind my shoulder. I could feel his body heat radiating into my back. "I didn't know your face," he whispered, his breath stirring my hair. "But I knew your soul. I knew you would like the dagger more than the necklace." I looked down at the table. He was right. My hand was hovering over the dagger. I turned to face him. We were inches apart. The air between us was thick, heavy with the scent of pine and unsaid promises. "You're crazy," I whispered. "You collected trophies for a ghost." "And now the ghost is real," he replied, his eyes dark with hunger. "And she is in my house." He reached out, his hand hovering over my waist, trembling slightly as if he was fighting the urge to crush me against him. "It's late," he said abruptly, pulling his hand back and stepping away. The loss of his proximity made me shiver. "You need rest. Your room is the master suite. I will sleep elsewhere." "Elsewhere?" I raised an eyebrow. "It's your house, Darius. Don't tell me the Alpha King sleeps on the couch." "If I sleep in that room with you tonight, Callie," he said, his voice rough, bordering on a growl, "neither of us will be doing any sleeping. And I promised myself I would court you, not devour you." He turned and walked out, leaving me alone in the room of treasures. I walked to the door of the master suite he had pointed to, my heart racing. I opened the door, ready to collapse into bed. But when I glanced back into the hallway, Darius wasn't walking away to a guest room. He was stripping off his shirt. The muscles of his back rippled as he shifted, his form blurring and expanding until a massive, midnight black wolf stood in the corridor. He was the size of a horse, his golden eyes glowing in the dark. He curled up directly in front of my door, lowered his massive head onto his paws, and let out a huff. He wasn't leaving. He was guarding me. Chapter 5. The Guardian Wolf. I stood in the doorway for a long time, staring. Most people would be terrified to find a wolf the size of a Ford F-150 parked outside their bedroom. And honestly, a part of me, the human part that liked paying taxes and drinking lattes, was screaming, "Run, he's going to eat you." But my wolf? My inner wolf was practically doing cartwheels. She was looking at the massive, obsidian beast curled up on the rug and whispering, "Finally, a heater that doesn't talk back." Darius didn't move. His breathing was slow and rhythmic, his ears twitching slightly as if tracking my heartbeat. He was guarding me. The king of all shifters. The man who could probably buy a country if he felt like it was sleeping on the floor like a glorified guard dog because he didn't trust the locks to keep me safe. I closed the door softly, but I couldn't lock it. Locking it felt like an insult. I crawled into the massive bed, sinking into sheets that had a thread count higher than my credit score. But sleep didn't come. I tossed. I turned. The silence of the mountain was deafening. After an hour of staring at the ceiling, I groaned, kicked off the duvet, and padded back to the door. I opened it a crack. One golden eye popped open instantly, fixing on me. "I can't sleep," I whispered to the wolf. "It's too quiet. And I don't know where the bathroom is." That was a lie. The bathroom was en suite and size of a studio apartment. The wolf let out a soft huff, a sound that was suspiciously close to a laugh. He lifted his massive head and nudged the door open wider with his nose. I sat down on the floor in the doorway, pulling my knees to my chest. He didn't transform back. He just shimmied closer, his black fur brushing against my bare toes. He radiated heat like a furnace. "You're ridiculous, you know that?" I told him, reaching out tentatively. "Sleeping in the hall. You have a back bad enough to snap a tree in half. You're going to wake up stiff." I buried my fingers in the thick ruff of fur around his neck. It was softer than silk, dense and warm. A low, vibrating purr started in his chest, rumbling through the floorboards and straight into my bones. It was the most soothing sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of safety. "Liam never let me touch his wolf," I murmured, the confession slipping out before I could stop it. "He said it was too dangerous, that I was too weak." Darius's growl was low and dark, a warning directed at a ghost. He shifted, maneuvering his massive head until it rested heavily on my lap, pinning me to the floor. The weight was grounding. It was a silent promise. "You are not weak. You are mine." I leaned back against the doorframe, still stroking his ears. The purr acted like a lullaby. My eyelids grew heavy. The last thing I remembered wasn't the fear of the future or the sting of rejection. It was the smell of storm and pine, and the absolute certainty that for the first time in my life, nothing could touch me. Chapter 6. The Breakfast Table. I woke up in the bed. I blinked, confused. I distinctly remembered falling asleep on the hallway floor with a 150-pound wolf head on my lap, but now I was tucked under the duvet, the morning sun streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, turning the snowy peaks outside into blinding white diamonds. My body felt heavy, not with exhaustion, but with that delicious, languid stretch that comes after the best sleep of your life. I sat up, sniffing the air. Bacon, coffee, and something sweet. My stomach gave a treacherous growl. I climbed out of bed, realizing I was still wearing the silk slip dress I'd worn under my wedding gown. It was wrinkled, but it covered the important bits. I followed the scent down the hallway, past the art gallery, and into a kitchen that looked like it belonged on the Food Network. It was all stainless steel, black marble, and open space. Darius was standing at the stove. He was human again, thankfully. He was wearing dark gray sweatpants that hung low on his hips and a tight black t-shirt that strained against his shoulders as he flipped something in a pan. He looked domestic. Cozy. If cozy meant a lethal predator making pancakes. "You drool in your sleep," he said without turning around. "I do not," I countered, hopping up onto one of the tall bar stools at the island. "I glisten." He turned, a smirk playing on his lips. He set a plate down in front of me. Pancakes, bacon, eggs, and a bowl of fresh fruit. "Eat." I reached for a fork, but he beat me to it. He speared a strawberry, dipped it in whipped cream, and held it out to my lips. His eyes were dark, challenging. It was a test. He wanted to see if I would submit, if I would let him care for me like a fragile thing. I looked at the strawberry. I looked at him. I leaned forward, opened my mouth, and bit the strawberry off the fork, deliberately grazing his thumb with my teeth. I didn't break eye contact. I chewed slowly, swallowed, and then reached out and took the fork from his hand. "I can feed myself, Your Majesty," I said, my voice sweet but firm. "My hands work just fine." Darius didn't look offended. He looked delighted. His pupils blew wide, swallowing the gold. He leaned across the island, bracing his hands on either side of my plate, trapping me. "Good," he growled. "I don't want a pet, Callie. Pets are boring. I want a challenge." "Careful what you wish for," I said, stabbing a pancake. "I'm high maintenance. I require coffee before conversation, and I don't do submissive Luna training." "I have no interest in training you," he murmured, his gaze dropping to my lips. "I'm much more interested in worshiping you." The air in the kitchen suddenly felt very thin. I took a gulp of orange juice to cool down the heat rising in my cheeks. "So," I said, trying to change the subject before he decided the kitchen island was a good place for a different kind of meal. "Where are my clothes, my jeans, my hoodie, the beat-up sneakers that have molded to my feet?" Darius straightened up, picking up his mug of coffee. He took a sip, looking entirely too pleased with himself. "Gone," he said simply. I froze. "Gone? Like, at the dry cleaners?" "Gone like I incinerated them," he corrected. "You entered a new life last night, Callie. You don't bring the rags of the past into the palace of the future. I bought you new things." He gestured vaguely toward the hallway. "Get dressed. We have things to do." I narrowed my eyes. "You burned my favorite hoodie?" "It had a hole in the elbow," he said with a shrug, "and it smelled like him." Oh, that was it. The jealousy, the possessiveness. "I'm going to make you pay for that," I warned, sliding off the stool. "I certainly hope so," he replied, his voice dropping to a velvet whisper as he watched me walk away. Chapter 7. The Wardrobe. I stormed into the room Darius had designated as the closet. I expected a walk-in. I got a boutique. The space was larger than my old bedroom. Rows of racks were filled with clothes: silk, velvet, cashmere. There were shelves of shoes, displays of jewelry, and a vanity table stacked with perfumes. I walked down the aisle, running my hand over the fabrics. They were beautiful. Objectively, they were stunning. There were ball gowns, cocktail dresses, and tailored suits that probably cost more than a kidney. But as I pulled out a lilac sundress with ruffles, I frowned. It wasn't me. This was what Darius thought a queen should wear. It was elegant. It was refined. It was a costume. He wanted to dress me up like a doll. He burned my hoodie, my armor, and replaced it with silk that would tear if I moved too fast. "Nope," I muttered, shoving the dress back onto the rack. "Not happening." I wasn't going to be his dress-up doll. If he wanted a challenge, he was going to get one. I walked past the section clearly meant for me and found a sliding door at the back. I pushed it open. Jackpot. Darius's side of the closet was a study in minimalism. Rows of crisp white shirts, black suits, and charcoal sweaters. It smelled like him. Crisp, masculine, and expensive. I grabbed one of his white dress shirts off a hanger. I slipped it on. It was massive on me. The shoulder seams hung halfway down my arms, and the hem hit me mid-thigh. I buttoned it up, rolled the sleeves to my elbows, and left the top 3 buttons undone. It was comfortable. It was rebellious. And it smelled entirely like him. I looked in the mirror. With my messy bedhead and his giant shirt, I looked like I'd just rolled out of his bed. Perfect. I grinned. I walked back out to the living area. Darius was sitting on a leather sofa, reviewing some documents on a tablet. He looked up as he heard my footsteps. "Did you find something to—" His voice died in his throat. He froze. His eyes locked onto me, traveling slowly from my bare legs up to the hem of his shirt, then up to the open collar where my neck was exposed. The tablet cracked in his hands. A spider web of fractures spread across the screen. He stood up slowly, the motion predatory. The air in the room shifted, becoming thick and heavy with intent. His pupils were blown so wide his eyes looked black. "That," he said, his voice a low, strangled rasp, "was a mistake." "Why?" I asked innocently, doing a little spin. "You burned my clothes. I had to borrow something. Do you mind?" "Mind." Darius took a step toward me. He looked like he was in physical pain, his hands clenching at his sides. "Callie, seeing you wearing my scent, wearing my skin..." He closed the distance between us in 2 long strides. He didn't touch me, but he leaned down, his face inches from mine, inhaling deeply. His control was fraying. I could feel the heat radiating off him, the wildness of the wolf scratching at the surface. "You are playing a dangerous game," he whispered, his gaze dropping to the buttons of the shirt. "You rejected the gowns of a queen to wear the mark of her king." "I wear what I want," I whispered back, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "I'm not your doll, Darius." "No," he agreed, his voice rough. "You are my undoing." He reached out, his hand hovering over the top button I had left undone. "Go change. Now, before I forget that I am a gentleman and rip that shirt off you just to see if you taste as good as you look." Chapter 8. The scent. "Make me," I challenged, the words slipping out before my brain could filter them. It was a reckless thing to say to an Alpha King who was currently vibrating with the effort of not ravishing me in the hallway. Darius's eyes darkened, the gold consumed by a pupil so wide it looked like a black hole. He didn't yell. He didn't argue. He moved. 1 second I was standing in the middle of the room, feeling smug in his oversized shirt. The next, my back was pressed against the cool plaster of the wall. Darius was everywhere, his hands braced on either side of my head, boxing me in, his body hard and unyielding against mine. "You think this is a game, Callie?" he rasped, lowering his head until his nose brushed against the pulse point of my neck. "You think because I haven't marked you yet, I can't?" I gasped, my head tilting back instinctively to give him better access. My body was betraying me. My heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, and deep in my chest, my wolf was howling for him to just bite me already. He inhaled deeply, a shudder running through his massive frame. "You smell like rain," he whispered into my skin, his lips ghosting over my collarbone. "Like rain and vanilla and me. It's driving me insane." "Then do something about it," I whispered, my hands gripping the lapels of his shirt, my shirt, to steady myself. "Or are you all talk, Your Majesty?" He froze. A low growl rumbled in his chest, vibrating through my sternum. He pulled back just enough to look me in the eye. His expression was a terrifying mix of adoration and predatory hunger. "If I take you now," he said, his voice rough with restraint, "it won't be gentle. I have waited 200 years. The beast inside me doesn't want to court you. He wants to claim you, mark you, and lock you in this room for a month." He leaned in closer, his lips brushing mine, a feather-light touch that was more agonizing than a bite. "I am trying to give you a choice, Callie, but every time you challenge me, you chip away at my control, and I am running out of patience." He pushed off the wall abruptly, putting 3 feet of distance between us, as if he had been burned. He ran a hand through his dark hair, looking ragged. "Go," he commanded, pointing down the hall. "Find a distraction, read a book, watch TV, just stay out of my sight for an hour while I go take a very cold shower." I stood there, breathless and flushed, my knees shaking. I wanted to chase him. I wanted to push him back against the wall. But the look in his eyes told me he wasn't bluffing. We were on the edge of a cliff, and one wrong move would send us tumbling over. I turned and fled down the hallway, my bare feet slapping against the marble, desperate to find somewhere to hide from the fire we had just started. Chapter 9. The library. I wandered aimlessly for 10 minutes, trying to get my heart rate under triple digits. The house was a labyrinth of glass and stone, beautiful but cold. I needed something to ground me. I needed an escape. I found it behind a set of heavy mahogany doors. The library was 2 stories high, lined floor to ceiling with books. A spiral staircase wound its way up to a mezzanine level, and a massive fireplace dominated the far wall. It smelled of old paper, leather binding, and lemon polish. Okay, I breathed, stepping inside and closing the door. This I can work with. I walked along the shelves, trailing my fingers over the spines. It wasn't just decorative. There were philosophy texts, ancient history, military strategy, and romance novels. I pulled a paperback out of the shelf, The Alpha's Secret Baby. You have got to be kidding me, I muttered, flipping it open. I find it important to understand contemporary culture, a deep voice said from the balcony above. I jumped, nearly dropping the book. Darius was leaning over the railing of the mezzanine, looking damp. His hair was wet, his shirt fresh. He had clearly taken that shower. You read trashy werewolf romance? I asked, waving the book at him. I read everything, he corrected, walking down the spiral stairs. He moved with a fluid grace that was mesmerizing. And I find those books inaccurate. The Alpha never grovels enough. I laughed, the sound echoing in the large room. Oh, and you would grovel? For the right woman? Darius stepped off the last stair and walked toward me. The tension from the hallway was gone, replaced by a simmering intellectual heat. I would crawl through glass. He plucked the book from my hand and slid it back onto the shelf, then pulled down a heavy leather-bound volume. The Prince by Machiavelli. Read this instead, he said, handing it to me. It's more practical for a future queen. I took the book, raising an eyebrow. I've read it. Sophomore year of college. I preferred Sun Tzu. Darius froze. He looked at me, really looked at me, as if seeing me for the first time. You prefer the art of war? Strategy over manipulation, I said with a shrug. Machiavelli is about keeping power through fear. Sun Tzu is about winning before you even fight. It's smarter. A slow smile spread across Darius's face. It wasn't the predatory smirk he usually wore. It was genuine. It was impressed. Liam said you were difficult, he murmured, stepping closer. He said you were opinionated and stubborn. Liam wanted a cheerleader, I replied, lifting my chin. I'm not a cheerleader. No, Darius agreed, reaching out to tuck a stray lock of hair behind my ear. His touch was electric but gentle this time. You are a strategist, a partner. I have spent centuries surrounded by wolves who agree with everything I say because they fear me. You have been here 12 hours, and you have challenged my authority, my wardrobe choices, and my literary taste. He leaned down, his forehead resting against mine. Do not ever stop. The intimacy of the moment was overwhelming. It wasn't just lust anymore. He saw me. He actually saw me. I think, I whispered, my voice trembling, I need to go wash this day off. My brain is fried. The master bath is prepared, he said softly, stepping back. Go, relax. I'll make sure you aren't disturbed. Chapter 10. The Bath. The bathroom was ridiculous. The tub was a sunken oval of black stone large enough to fit a small family, positioned right in front of a window overlooking the snowy valley. I sank into the steaming water, sighing as the heat seeped into my bones. The bubbles were thick and smelled of lavender and bergamot. I closed my eyes, letting my head rest against the cool stone rim. I was finally relaxing, finally letting my guard down. Click. My eyes snapped open. Darius walked in. He didn't knock. He didn't announce himself. He just strolled in carrying a silver tray with a glass of red wine and a small bowl of dark chocolate. What are you doing? I squeaked, sinking lower into the bubbles until only my nose was visible. I'm naked. I am aware, Darius said calmly. He set the tray down on the edge of the tub. He didn't look at the water. He kept his eyes strictly on my face, a gentlemanly act that was somehow even more intimate. Get out, I said, though there was no heat in my voice. "No," he replied simply. He sat down on the tiled steps leading up to the tub, fully clothed in his dark suit trousers and white shirt. He was close enough to touch, but he kept his hands clasped on his knees. "I brought you wine. It's a vintage from a vineyard I owned in the 1800s. It breathes well." I slowly emerged from the bubbles, reaching for the glass. My wet arm dripped water onto the stone. Darius's eyes tracked a single droplet as it rolled down my wrist, his jaw tightening. "You're a masochist," I said, taking a sip. The wine was incredible, rich and velvety. "Sitting here while I'm in here? I am a guardian," he corrected. "I like to know where you are, and I like the sound of your voice." We sat in silence for a moment, the steam swirling around us. It felt strangely domestic, intimate in a way that had nothing to do with sex. "Tell me something real," I said suddenly, watching him over the rim of my glass. "Not Alpha King stuff. Something real about you." Darius looked out the window at the snow. "I hate the cold," he admitted softly. "I built this house here because it is defensible, and because the isolation keeps the pack politics away. But I hate the winter. It reminds me of being alone." He turned his gaze back to me, the gold in his eyes burning with a quiet intensity. "That is why I crave your fire, Callie. You are the first warm thing I have felt in a very long time." The vulnerability in his voice shattered my last defense. I set the wineglass down. "Darius," I whispered. He leaned forward. The air between us crackled. He placed his hand on the rim of the tub, inches from my wet shoulder. He was going to touch me. I wanted him to touch me. The door to the bathroom burst open. "Your Majesty!" a frantic voice shouted from the bedroom. "We have a code red on the southern border!" Darius froze. The vulnerability vanished instantly, replaced by the cold, hard mask of the king. He stood up, his water-like grace gone, replaced by lethal tension. "Get out!" Darius roared at the intruder, his voice shaking the walls. "But sir, it's the council. They know she's here." Chapter 11. The Command. "Code red. Are you serious?" I wrapped a plush white towel around myself, stepping out of the tub as water pooled on the expensive stone floor. Darius had vanished the second the intruder, a terrified-looking beta named Marcus, had burst in. "Get out," I told Marcus, who was still standing in the doorway, looking like he wanted to dissolve into the floor tiles. "Unless you want to explain to the king why you're staring at his naked mate." Marcus yelped and scrambled backward, slamming the door. I dried off quickly, my heart racing. Not from fear, but from annoyance. I had been about 5 seconds away from a very interesting moment with Darius, and now the mood was shattered by politics. I threw on a silk robe that cost more than my car and marched out of the bedroom. I followed the sound of shouting. Darius was in his office down the hall. The door was open. He was pacing behind a massive obsidian desk, phone pressed to his ear, radiating enough angry energy to power the entire eastern seaboard. "I don't care what the council bylaws say, Alexander," Darius roared, his voice shaking the glass walls. "She is mine. If they want to contest the claim because the paperwork wasn't filed in triplicate, tell them they can come collect the forms from my cold, dead hands." He slammed his hand onto the desk. A marble paperweight cracked in half. "No, I will not schedule a Zoom call. I am the Alpha King, not a mid-level marketing manager." He was losing it. The cool, collected predator was gone, replaced by a stressed-out man dealing with bureaucracy. It was almost humanizing. I walked into the room. Darius didn't notice me at first. He was too busy vibrating with rage. "If you tell me to calm down one more time, Alexander, I will fly there and rip your—" "Darius." I didn't shout. I spoke his name firmly, cutting through the noise. He spun around, phone still glued to his ear, his eyes wild with golden fire. For a second, he looked like he was going to snap at me. I walked right up to him. I didn't flinch at the growl rumbling in his chest. Right over his thundering heart. "You're shouting. I said calmly. Stop it. The silence that followed was absolute. On the other end of the line, I could hear a tiny voice squeaking, "Hello? Your Majesty?" Darius stared at me. His chest heaved beneath my palm. The gold in his eyes swirled, fighting for dominance, but the anger began to bleed out, replaced by shock. "Hang up the phone," I ordered softly. "You're the king. You don't scream at underlings. You make them wait until you're ready." Darius blinked. Slowly, very slowly, he lowered the phone. He pressed the end call button without looking at the screen, his gaze never leaving mine. "You," he started, his voice rough. "You just ordered me to hang up on the High Counselor." "He was annoying you," I said with a shrug, removing my hand from his chest. "And you were ruining my zen. I was having a very nice bath." A slow, disbelief-filled grin spread across Darius's face. He looked at the phone, then back at me. "I have generals who wet themselves when I raise my voice. And you walk in here in a bathrobe and silence me." "Someone has to," I said, tightening the sash of my robe. "You catch more flies with honey, Darius. Or in your case, you scare fewer people into cardiac arrest if you use your indoor voice." He laughed. It was a dark, rich sound. He walked around the desk, crowding my space again. "You aren't scared of the council? They want to take you away. They say the rejection wasn't finalized before I claimed you." "Let them try," I said, meeting his gaze. "I chose you. No old men in a boardroom can change that." Darius looked at me with something dangerously close to worship. "Go get dressed for dinner, Callie, before I decide to skip the meal and eat you right here on this desk." Chapter 12. The Gift of Independence. Dinner was served in a glass-walled dining room that hovered over the precipice of the cliff. The view was terrifyingly beautiful. Nothing but snow, moonlight, and a 1,000-foot drop. The code red had been handled. Apparently, my order to hang up made Darius realize he didn't need to argue, just dictate. He was in a frighteningly good mood. He had changed into a fresh black shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal his forearms. I was wearing an emerald green slip dress I'd found in the closet, mostly because it was the only thing that didn't have sequins or feathers. "You didn't eat your steak," Darius noted, watching me. "I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop," I admitted, swirling my wine. "First the rescue, then the clothes, then the bath, then the council drama. You're spoiling me, Darius. Usually this is the part where the guy hands me a list of rules. Don't talk to other men. Don't leave the house. Wear this collar." Darius stopped cutting his meat. He set his knife and fork down with precise, deliberate movements. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. He slid it across the table toward me. "I don't have rules," he said quietly. "I have standards, and my standard is that my mate is not a prisoner." I eyed the envelope. "What is this? A prenup?" "Open it." I hesitated, then picked it up. The paper was heavy. I broke the wax seal and pulled out the documents inside. It was a deed, a property deed. I scanned the address. It was a building in the heart of the nearest city, a historic building. "The Hawthorne Library and Bookstore," I read aloud, my breath hitching. "Darius, this place has been closed for years. It's a landmark." "It was closed," Darius corrected. "I bought it this morning. It's yours." I looked up at him, stunned. "Mine? Like, to visit?" "To own," he said, intense, leaning forward. "To run. To burn down. I don't care. I remember you telling your sister once, years ago, at a pack gathering I observed from afar, that you wanted to curate stories, that you wanted a place where people could escape." You remembered that?" Tears pricked my eyes. I blinked them back furiously. Fierce queens don't cry over real estate. "I remember everything about you," Darius said softly. I don't want to keep you in this glass house, Callie. I want you to have a kingdom of your own. Independence isn't a gift I give you, it's a right you already have. I'm just providing the venue. I stared at the deed. Liam had never even remembered my coffee order. Darius had bought me a library because he overheard a conversation I had 3 years ago. I don't know what to say, I whispered. Say you'll keep challenging me, Darius replied. Say you won't lose that fire just because I give you everything you want. I started, but a flash of white light blinded me. Crack boom! Thunder shook the entire house, vibrating the silverware on the table. The lights flickered once, twice, and then the room plunged into total darkness. The storm! Darius's voice came from the dark, closer now. It's here. Chapter 13. The Thunderstorm. The darkness was absolute. The only light came from the occasional strobe flash of lightning outside the glass walls, illuminating the falling snow like sparks. Stay still, Darius's voice rumbled, deep and reassuring. The generators will kick in, eventually. A match flared. Darius was standing by the sideboard, lighting a candelabra. The flame illuminated the sharp angles of his face, casting shadows that made him look more wolf than man. He carried the candles over to the living area, where a massive fireplace sat cold and dark. With a flick of his wrist and a subtle flare of alpha energy, a fire roared to life in the grate. Come, he beckoned. The dining room is glass. It will get cold quickly. I moved toward the fire, the warmth drawing me in. We sat on the thick fur rug in front of the hearth. The storm outside was raging now, wind howling against the glass like a banshee trying to get in. It felt like the world had ended, and we were the last 2 people left alive. Are you afraid of storms? Darius asked, watching the firelight dance on my skin. No, I lied. Boom. A crack of thunder sounded directly overhead, loud enough to rattle my teeth. I flinched, hard, and scrambled backward, landing right in Darius's lap. His arms closed around me instantly, steel bands of muscle locking me against his chest. Liar, he murmured against my hair. It was loud, I defended, though I didn't try to move. And I'm not scared. I was just startled, strategically retreating. Strategically retreating into my arms, he teased, his hand rubbing soothing circles on my back. I accept your surrender. I looked up at him. The playfulness died in his throat. We were close, too close. I was straddling his lap, my hands resting on his shoulders. The firelight turned his eyes into pools of molten gold. The scent of him, rain, pine, and arousal, was overwhelming. The air between us grew heavy, charged with static that had nothing to do with the storm. Callie, he whispered. It was a warning, a plea. Darius, I breathed back. His gaze dropped to my lips. He hesitated. The king who took what he wanted was giving me one last chance to run, one last chance to say no. I didn't run. I threaded my fingers into the hair at the nape of his neck and pulled him down. Our lips met, and the world exploded. It wasn't a tentative first kiss. It was a collision. It was hunger and desperation and 200 years of waiting crashing into one moment. He groaned, a guttural sound that vibrated against my mouth, and his arms tightened, crushing me to him. He tasted like wine and fire. His tongue swept into my mouth, demanding, claiming. I met him stroke for stroke, my body igniting. He shifted, flipping us over so I was on my back on the rug, his heavy body pressing me down into the fur. He broke the kiss to bury his face in my neck, his teeth grazing the sensitive skin right over my mating gland. Mine, he growled against my skin, his control snapping like a twig in a hurricane. God help me, you are mine. I arched into him, my hands gripping his shirt. Then stop talking, I gasped, and show me. He pulled back, his eyes wild, his chest heaving. He reached for the neckline of my dress. Ripe. The sound of silk tearing echoed in the quiet room. Chapter 14. The Edge. The sound of expensive silk tearing was the loudest thing in the room, cutting through the thunder outside. Darius froze. His hands were still gripping the ruined fabric at my waist, his chest heaving against mine. The golden fire in his eyes flickered, momentarily replaced by a look of sheer panicked horror. He pulled back as if he'd been burned, his breathing ragged. He looked at the torn dress, then at my face. I didn't mean to. The beast. He is too close to the surface. I am going to hurt you. He started to scramble backward, putting distance between us on the rug. I need to go. I need to lock myself in the vault until... Oh, for the love of the moon, I groaned, grabbing him by the lapels of his shirt and yanking him back down. Darius, stop being a martyr. It was an ugly dress anyway. I looked like a festive pickle. Callie, you don't understand, he rasped, his muscles coiled tight as steel cables under my hands. I have the strength to crush boulders. I am losing control. If I mark you tonight in this state, I might break you. I straddled his hips again, effectively pinning the Alpha King to his own floor. I leaned down, my hair curtaining around our faces, creating a private world amidst the firelight. Look at me, I commanded. He did. His gaze was tortured, hungry, and terrified. I am not glass, I whispered fiercely, tracing the sharp line of his jaw. I am not some fragile human who needs to be handled with kid gloves. I am a wolf. I am your wolf. Stop treating me like something you're going to break and start treating me like your mate. Something snapped in his eyes. The hesitation vanished, incinerated by a flare of possessive heat. You want the monster? He growled, his voice dropping to a subsonic rumble that vibrated in my very core. I want the king, I replied, leaning in until our lips were a breath apart. And if the king is a monster, then let him eat. He didn't give me a chance to breathe. He flipped us over, his movements blurring with speed. One moment I was on top, the next my back was pressed into the mattress of the master bed. I didn't even remember him carrying me there. He loomed over me, shedding his shirt in one violent motion. His chest was a landscape of muscle and old scars, glowing faintly in the dark with the aura of his power. He looked magnificent. He looked terrifying. Last chance, he panted, bracing his hands on the pillows beside my head. Once I start, Callie, I will not stop until the whole world knows you belong to me. I reached up, wrapping my legs around his waist, pulling him down. If you stop now, Darius, I'm filing for divorce before we're even married. Chapter 15. The Mark. There was no room for thought. There was only sensation. Darius didn't make love to me. He worshipped me. But it wasn't the gentle, flower petal kind of worship. It was a storm. It was lips and hands and friction, a desperate, consuming heat that made the blizzard outside look like a mild breeze. Every touch was a brand. Every kiss was a claim. He moved with a relentless rhythm that drove every thought from my head except his name. I matched him, claw for claw, bite for bite. I wasn't submitting. I was meeting him in the middle of the fire. Callie, he groaned, burying his face in the crook of my neck. You taste like destiny. The tension in the room ratcheted up, tighter and tighter, until I felt like a violin string about to snap. The pleasure was bordering on pain, a sweet, sharp ache that demanded release. And then the instinct took over. Mark me, I begged, my head falling back, baring my throat to him. Darius, do it, now. He didn't hesitate. He growled, a sound that wasn't human, and sank his teeth into the sensitive skin where my neck met my shoulder. It wasn't pain. It was an explosion of golden light. The moment his teeth pierced my skin, the world turned white. A jolt of pure energy shot through my body, connecting my nervous system to his. I gasped, arching off the mattress, my fingers digging into his shoulders. I could feel him. Not just his body, but him. I felt the ancient loneliness he had carried for centuries, dissolving like mist. I felt his fierce, overwhelming protectiveness. I felt the sheer, terrifying magnitude of his love for me. It poured into my soul like molten gold, filling every crack, every broken piece left by my past. Mine, his voice echoed in my head, not spoken, but thought. My queen, my soul, my life. Yours, I projected back, the bond snapping into place with the permanence of a mountain taking root. The climax hit us then, riding the wave of the marking. It was shattering. It was a supernova contained in a single room. I cried out, his name tearing from my throat as the universe narrowed down to just the two of us, bound together by blood and magic. He collapsed against me, his heavy breathing syncing with mine. The golden light of the bond slowly faded to a warm, humming glow in the back of my mind. I lay there, staring up at the dark ceiling, feeling the steady thrum of his heartbeat against my chest. I touched the fresh mark on my neck. It tingled, alive with his power. I was no longer just Callie, I was Callie, mate of the Alpha King, and for the first time in my life, I felt completely whole. Chapter 16. The Morning After. Waking up felt different. Usually waking up involves grogginess, maybe a desire for coffee, and the cold realization that you have to go to work. This time, waking up felt like tuning into a radio station that was stuck on max volume. Soft skin, sun, beautiful, mine. Never let her go. The thoughts weren't mine. They were heavy, dark, and tasted like burnt sugar. I blinked my eyes open. The room was bathed in the brilliant, blinding white light of sun reflecting off snow. I was tangled in the sheets, my limbs heavy and sated. And there was an arm draped over my waist, an arm that weighed about as much as a tree branch. I turned my head. Darius was awake. He was lying on his side, propped up on one elbow, staring at me. He looked like a fallen angel who had finally found heaven. Hair messy, eyes half-lidded and glowing with that unnerving gold light, a lazy, satisfied smirk playing on his lips. "Good morning, wife," he murmured. Wife. The word hit me with a thud. Mine. Safe. Lock the doors. Keep her here. The thoughts flooded my brain again. I flinched. "Darius," I whispered, rubbing my temple. You're shouting." He frowned. "I'm whispering." "In your head," I clarified, sitting up and pulling the sheet to my chest. "The bond. It's loud." He sat up, the sheet falling to his waist. "Ah. The morning after the marking is usually the most intense. The mental barriers haven't settled yet." He reached for me, his hand sliding around the back of my neck to pull me in for a kiss. "Need her. Taste her." I pulled back. I didn't mean to. It was a reflex. The intensity of his emotion, the sheer suffocating weight of his obsession hit me like a physical wall. It wasn't just love, it was a need so deep it felt predatory. He wanted to consume me. He wanted to wrap me in cotton and lock me in this glass tower forever. Darius froze. His hand was still suspended in the air. The gold in his eyes swirled darker. She pulled away. Why? Rejection. Did I hurt her? "Stop," I said, scooting to the edge of the bed. "Darius, stop thinking. I can hear you spiraling." He lowered his hand slowly. "You are withdrawing." "I am breathing," I said, standing up and grabbing his discarded shirt from the floor. I needed a layer. I needed armor. "I've been independent my whole life, Darius. Suddenly having your emotions echoing in my skull is a lot." "I can't help what I feel," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerously low pitch. "I waited an eternity for you. The fear of losing you is present. I'm not going anywhere," I said, buttoning the shirt with trembling fingers. "But I need a minute. I need coffee. And I need to not hear you planning to lock the doors to keep me safe." I walked toward the door. I could feel his gaze on my back. It felt like a physical tether, pulling me back to the bed. "Don't leave the room." The command wasn't spoken. It was a pulse of alpha power, accidental but potent. My feet faltered. My wolf wanted to obey. I stopped. I turned around. Darius looked horrified that he had slipped. "Did you just try to command me?" I asked, my voice deadly quiet. Chapter 17. The Withdrawal. "Did you just try to command me?" The question hung in the air, sharp and jagged as broken glass. Darius looked as if I'd just gutted him with that dagger from his collection. The gold in his eyes fractured, swirling with a chaotic mix of panic and self-loathing. He pulled his hand back, gripping the edge of the mattress so hard the wood frame groaned in protest. "No," he rasped, his voice sounding wrecked. "Callie, no. I would never. It was an accident. The bond is new. My instincts, they are screaming to keep you close, to lock the world out." "That's the problem, Darius," I said, my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. I buttoned the last button of his shirt, the fabric feeling like a shield. "Your instincts are to build a wall around me, but I'm not a treasure to be hoarded. I'm a person." "I know," he pleaded, standing up. He reached for me, then stopped himself, curling his fingers into fists at his sides. "I know that. But the beast inside me, he remembers 200 years of solitude. Now that you are here, the thought of you walking out that door feels like death." "I'm just going for a walk, Darius," I said, backing toward the bedroom door. "I need air. I need to think without hearing your panic echoing in my skull." "Callie, don't follow me," I said firmly. "Please, if you respect me, let me walk out of this room alone." He froze. It took every ounce of willpower he possessed, but he stayed planted by the bed. He looked like a statue of misery, watching his entire world walk away. I turned and fled. I didn't stop in the hallway. I didn't stop in the kitchen. I grabbed a heavy wool coat from the mudroom and pushed out the back door into the biting cold. The air was crisp, smelling of pine and snow. It slapped me in the face, clearing the fog of pheromones and mating hormones. I trudged through the snow, heading toward the sound of rushing water near the edge of the property. Inside my head, the bond was a cacophony. I could feel Darius pacing. I could feel his jagged, spiraling fear. "She's leaving. I messed up. I'm too much. I'm losing her." It was suffocating. I leaned against a tree, closing my eyes. "Quiet," I whispered to the wind. "Just be quiet." And then, it happened. Click. The noise stopped. It wasn't a fade-out. It was a hard cut. The flood of Darius's emotions vanished instantly, replaced by a silence so profound it felt heavy. I gasped, my hand flying to the mark on my neck. It was still there, warm against my skin, but the connection, the mental bridge, was gone. "Darius?" I whispered, panic flaring in my own chest. There was no answer. No reassuring hum of his presence, no possessive growl, just nothing. It felt cold. It felt like I was back at the altar, alone. Had he rejected me? Had I pushed him too far and he decided I wasn't worth the trouble? The silence of the woods suddenly felt terrifying. I wasn't fierce anymore. I was isolated. I pushed off the tree, turning back toward the house, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm. "Darius!" I screamed, the wind snatching the name from my lips. Chapter 18. The Pursuit. I was about to sprint back to the glass fortress when a shadow detached itself from the tree line. Darius. He wasn't running. He was walking toward me, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his trousers. He wasn't wearing a coat, just the black t-shirt and sweatpants, completely unbothered by the freezing temperature. I stopped, my breath puffing out in white clouds. You blocked me." He stopped 10 feet away. He didn't close the distance. He looked defeated, the proud Alpha King reduced to a man standing in the snow, afraid to touch his own wife. "You said you needed silence," he said, his voice flat, devoid of the usual dominant rumble. "You said my emotions were suffocating you. So, I built a wall. I severed the mental link. It felt like you left, I admitted, my voice shaking. It felt like you died. I would rather feel like I died than make you feel like a prisoner, Darius replied, his golden eyes burning with a quiet, devastating intensity. He took a step closer, the snow crunching under his boots. Callie, I am a monster. I have been an apex predator for centuries. I take what I want. I destroy what threatens mine. I don't know how to be moderate. I don't know how to love you a little bit. I only know how to consume you. He looked at his hands, then back at me. When you walked out, my instinct was to tackle you, to drag you back to the bed and keep you there until you forgot the world outside. That is who I am. A shiver went down my spine. Part fear, part thrill. But that is not who I want to be for you, he continued softly. I blocked the bond because I cannot trust myself not to command you again. I cannot trust myself not to manipulate your emotions with mine. He looked up, his expression raw. If the bond is too much, if I am too much, tell me. I can keep the wall up. I can give you the deed to the library, the money, the freedom. You can live in the East Wing. We can be companions. He choked on the word. It clearly physically hurt him to say it. Is that what you want? He whispered. Do you want to be free of my obsession? I looked at him. Really looked at him. He was offering to tear his own soul in half to make me comfortable. He was the king of the world, and he was offering to live in misery just so I wouldn't feel stifled. That wasn't control. That was devotion. You idiot, I whispered, wiping a snowflake from my eyelash. Darius flinched. I beg your pardon? You think I want a companion? I took a step toward him. You think I laughed at Liam because I wanted a roommate? I want the fire, Darius. I want the obsession. I just need to know that I am the one holding the matches. I closed the distance between us, grabbing the front of his t-shirt. Drop the wall, now. He hesitated. Callie, if I open it, drop it. He exhaled. Boom. The bond slammed back open. A tidal wave of relief, love, desire, and pure, unadulterated need crashed into me. It nearly knocked me off my feet. It was heavy. It was dark. It was magnificent. Better, I breathed, leaning my forehead against his chest. You are playing with fire, he groaned, wrapping his arms around me finally, pulling me into his warmth. Good, I murmured. I was freezing. Come inside, he said, scoping me up into his arms before I could protest. There is something I need to do, something to settle this power struggle, once and for all. Chapter 19. The Kneel, the climax. Darius carried me straight to the master bedroom. He didn't put me on the bed. He set me down in the center of the room on the plush Persian rug. The fire was still crackling in the hearth, casting long, dancing shadows against the walls. The storm outside had quieted to a soft snowfall, the world silent and white. Darius? I asked, watching him. What are you doing? He didn't answer. He backed up a step, giving me space. His face was solemn, stripped of all the playful arrogance I had seen before. He looked like a warrior preparing for a sacred rite. You fear losing yourself, he said, his voice deep and resonant. You fear that because I am a king and an alpha, that you will inevitably become a subject, that my power will overshadow yours. It's a valid fear, I whispered. You own half the world. The world means nothing, Darius said. And then he moved. Slowly, deliberately, the Alpha King, the man who made entire packs tremble, the man who had never bowed to anyone in 200 years, lowered himself. He dropped to one knee, then the other. He sat back on his heels, his hands resting open on his thighs. He looked up at me, his golden eyes shining with absolute clarity. Then, he tilted his head back. He exposed his throat. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. In wolf culture, this wasn't just a gesture. This was the ultimate submission. It was baring the jugular, the kill spot, to another. It was saying, I trust you with my life. You have the power to destroy me. Darius, get up, I hissed, looking around as if someone might see. You're the king. And you are my queen. He spoke to the ceiling, his throat vibrating with the words. I possess the land, Callie. I possess the wealth. I command the armies. But make no mistake. He lowered his chin just enough to lock eyes with me, the intensity searing my soul. You rule me. He reached out, taking my hand and placing it on his neck, right over the thumping pulse of his carotid artery. My heart beats because you allow it, he whispered. My wolf submits to no one but you. If I am ever too much, if I ever frighten you, you simply have to say the word. I am not your captor, Callie. I am your sword. I am your shield. And I am yours to command. The bond flared, not with dominance, but with a surrender so total it brought tears to my eyes. He wasn't giving me power to placate me. He was showing me the truth. He was the strongest thing on earth, and he was voluntarily handing me the leash. The fear that had been nagging at me, the fear of losing my independence, evaporated. I wasn't losing anything. I was gaining an empire, and a partner who would burn the world down if I asked for a light. I dropped to my knees in front of him, shattering the formality. I don't want to rule you, I whispered, cupping his face in my hands. I just want to walk beside you. Impossible, Darius smirked, leaning into my touch. You will always be ahead of me. I am merely chasing your light. He leaned forward, kissing me softly, a seal on the vow he had just made. Now, he murmured against my lips. Stand up, my queen. I believe we have a honeymoon to start, and I am done talking. Chapter 20. The Coronation of Hearts. 6 months. That's how long it had been since I walked out of a dingy pack chapel and stepped into a fairy tale written by a madman. I stood on the balcony of the glass fortress, leaning against the railing. The summer sun had replaced the snow, turning the valley below into a lush explosion of green and wildflowers. The wind was warm, but it wasn't nearly as warm as the arms that wrapped around my waist from behind. You're thinking again, Darius murmured, his chin resting on top of my head. I can feel the gears turning. It's loud. I'm reflecting, I corrected, leaning back into him. The bond hummed between us, a steady golden river of contentment. It wasn't the chaotic tidal wave it had been in the beginning. It was settled, deep, unshakable. Today is the day, you know. Is it? Darius kissed my temple. I thought today was stay in bed and ignore the council day. It's the day Liam and Clara are getting married, I said casually. Darius went still. The playful energy vanished, replaced instantly by that sharp, predatory alertness. Ah, the invitation. The one you tried to eat? It smelled like desperation and cheap cardstock, he defended, his grip on my waist tightening possessively. I did us a favor by incinerating it. I laughed, turning in his arms to face him. He looked devastatingly good, as always. He was wearing a casual white linen shirt, open at the collar, revealing the faint scar where I had accidentally scratched him during our enthusiastic activities last night. Do you want to go? He asked, his golden eyes searching mine for any sign of regret. I can have the jet ready in 10 minutes. We can crash the reception. I can buy the venue and evict them in the middle of the toast. I can challenge him for sport. Darius, I said, smoothing the front of his shirt. You're doing it again. Offering to destroy your enemies? Being a dramatic overlord, I smiled. Why would I want to go back there? I have a library to run. I have a kingdom to manage. And I have a husband who requires a suspicious amount of attention. Darius's expression softened, the tension bleeding out of his shoulders. He reached into his pocket. Speaking of husbands. He pulled out a small black velvet box. You already marked me, I reminded him, touching the sensitive spot on my neck. And you gave me a library, and a car, and a private island. Those were distinct assets, he dismissed. This is a promise. He opened the box. Inside sat a diamond that was frankly insulting to physics. It was a yellow diamond, the exact shade of his eyes, surrounded by a halo of black onyx. It was fierce. It was sharp. It wasn't a ring for a princess. It was a ring for a queen. I never asked you properly, Darius said softly, taking the ring out. I just stole you. I claimed you. I made you mine before you even had a chance to breathe. He took my left hand. So, I am asking now, Callie. Not as your alpha, but as the man who breathes for you. Will you stay? Will you rule this ridiculous glass house and this impossible man forever? I looked at the ring, then at him. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who tried to shrink herself to fit into Liam's small world, the one who thought love meant being quiet. Then I looked at the king who had knelt for me, the man who burned the world just to keep me warm. Put it on, I whispered. He slid the ring onto my finger. It fit perfectly. Forever is a long time, Darius, I smirked, grabbing his collar and pulling him down to my level. I hope you have the stamina. Test me, he growled, a wicked glint in his eye. He kissed me then, deep and slow, sealing the promise under the summer sun. As we pulled apart, breathless and smiling, he looked out over the valley. You know, he mused, if we hurry, we could still fly over the ceremony and drop water balloons filled with blue dye, just for closure. I laughed, the sound free and unburdened, echoing off the mountains. Liam? I asked, looking at the man who held my soul in his hands. I honestly don't even remember his name.